Okay, well, you're once again getting some great speakers to come in and share some cultural information with you. Today you even have a little taste sampling of some cultural foods, Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander foods. So isn't that special? I'm going to introduce you to Dr. McElliott. You know her. She's presented to you before. She's going to then present to you, introduce to you the guest speakers that will be here today, and then she'll also present some findings and some information with Dr. McMillan as well. So let me have Dr. McElliott. And we need to keep the lights up for the PowerPoint, so it may be a little more difficult to see, but because we're videoing this to show for future students, we're going to need to keep the lights on. Yes, which one's hers first? The obesity prevention or the cultural and diet?
Okay, great. So how's everyone doing? Good, good, all right. You guys are making it through the semester, right? So I wanted to reiterate what Dr. Chandler said, that today we're going to continue discussing, looking at dietary issues and childhood obesity issues, and specifically we're going to look at this in Pacific Islander populations. So this is kind of a nice gradual built on where you had an overall broad general background, but more specific on childhood obesity in the United States. And then we went ahead and looked at each specific different underrepresented groups in the, and actually underrepresented but also at-risk populations. So we looked at the Latino population, and we also looked at psychosocial factors that influence childhood obesity and obesity in the adult population. And we had a nice presentation from Latino Health Access. And then we talked about Southeast Asian and distinguishing Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders from the Southeast Asian population, that there are similarities, but there's definitely differences between those groups. And then we're going to go ahead and talk about Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders today and look at dietary intakes, as well as looking at childhood obesity and adult obesity issues and health disparities in this population. So that just gives you a little bit of a summary of what we've been doing so far, and I'm just so grateful today to have our partners, our Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander partners in Southern California come. I'd like to introduce you to Ka'ala Pang and Victor Pang. Please come up. Juliet, and of course, and Juliet McMillan. We've been a team. We've worked together for nearly a decade. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you. So, and they have been such. I mean, if you think about advocates, people who are just never tirelessly working for the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community, that's who you want to be, right? Someone who's doing that for your community and going out there. So thank you very much graciously for coming, and I'll hand it over to Ka'ala to speak.
Mahalo.
So, mahalo.
I'll just clip this on. I project pretty well, so let me know if you need less or more volume, which I can give both. I don't really need a PA system, but for the sake of taping, we'll do this. Aloha, I'm Ka'ala Pang. My husband, Ka'ivi Pang. We're with Pacific Islander Health Partnership. And we are a fully volunteer organization in Santa Ana, so just down the street. And if you think this is for a class program, second, my agenda for coming is we're looking for students to help us with various projects. And we're taking on a new initiative. The Kellogg Foundation has given us an opportunity that we're applying for to look at childhood obesity. And how many of you know about Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders? A little bit? Okay, good. How many of you have friends who are Pacific Islanders? Awesome. Okay. How many of you know the three big groups that classify Pacific Islanders, what they're identified as? The three major groups. I'll start off. Hawaiians are Polynesians. So who are the Marshall Islanders, the Chukis, the Ponapan? There are three, the second group. Micronesians. multiple small islands all over the Pacific. Polynesian, the big islands, okay, that also represents some of our critical disparities that we're going to learn about. And the last group are called Melanesians, okay? They're Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and all those islands near the equator. So basically, as Polynesians, not only do we come from large islands, the clicker is, oh, thank you, mahalo. Okay, so basically, the islands are located in 3 triangles. The Polynesian are the larger groups of islands, larger islands. We start with Rapa Nui, Easter Island, up the coast of Chile. We go all the way up to Hawaii, our home island, and to Aotearoa, New Zealand. So that's the Polynesian Triangle. We'll come back to them because we'll be referencing most of the discussion about my home island. The second group, second group is the Micronesians, multiple small islands, and they are in great threat of global warming, actually losing our ocean front. So the Micronesians, the Marshallese, the Chukis, the Yappies, the Ponapan, very small islands, atolls, sandbars, very small islands. It was also ground zero during our nuclear testing in the 50s. So think one step next. Would we consider that island habitable? Any of you heard about Bikini Island? I'm sure all of you are in good shape. You all wear bikinis at the beach. There's an island in Micronesia called Bikini Island that is not inhabitable. It radiates at night. So we're talking about communities that were there during the 50s, were never addressed, were never warned, that we're testing in the Pacific. And so many of them are here in the US. They are your neighbors in Costa Mesa, in Santa Ana, who our government, because of the testing, realized the nuclear exposure, said, come to the US. We'll let you work. Please, we'll have a job for you. So many of them came, worked 30, 35 years, continued to work, pay into their taxes, federal and state taxes. They retire and turn around and they have no benefits. They're called migrants. They're governed by their country to the US, and they're restricted from access to Medicare, Medi-Cal because of the Compact for Free Association. What isn't written in the Compact, they're not entitled to. So there lies our major thrust and advocacy on their behalf. The third group are the Melanesians. They're closer to the equator. They're fairly dark-skinned because they are closer to the equator, and they come from Fiji, Papua New Guinea, and there's a growing number of them throughout California. The Pacific Islanders, the largest population, are on the West Coast. Make sense? We're island people. We dry out as we go inland. But now we're on all the states within all 50 states. Okay, thank you. So our greetings to you in Samoan is talofa. Like aloha, talofa. From Samoa, maloelele is our Tongan greeting. Kia orana, our Tahitian greeting. Kia ora, our Maori greeting from Aotearoa. Our Chamorros say very easy, half a day. Yakwe is our Marshallese, and Ali, our Palauan greeting from Micronesia. Papua New Guinea, Bula Vinaka, or Bula, is their greeting, Fijian. So as we travel the Pacific, we're all here now in the western area, West Coast, the largest concentration of Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders. Next. We start our Hawaii journey, and we're going to concentrate our Native Hawaiian diet. Far be it from us to share the Tongan, Samoan, or other island diets. We would like to have them probably in the future present their diet and their specific issues. We begin the beginning of man among Native Hawaiians. We all know Wakea, the sky, consummated Papa, Mother Earth. The first child was a human life form, but was a stillborn. They then planted it at their hale, their hut, and from that came the first taro plant. So we are saying kalo, or the taro, kalo for Hawaiians, is the elder brother of our native Hawaiians. So that's why taro. Poi, how many of you tried poi? It's not the best tasting thing, but we'll teach you how to eat them. Thank you. Our taro patch, our water taro patch, and this grows in Long Beach. We're doing taro patches through our community gardens, and this is our taro patch, which is now, looks like that, but on dry land. Okay? Next. Taro kalo for us is very rich in fiber, calcium, potassium, high in the vitamins A, B1, B2, and C. Poi is the kinolau, and we're going to share our kinolau with you. The kinolau is the spirit form of the various foods that we're going to share with you today. So poi o kalo is the kinolau of Kane, the god who brought us fresh water. And you know, without water, there is no life. Again, this is now the current contemporary poi pounding. Physically, you'll see a poi pounder here. You can try your hand at it. We didn't bring kalo, but you can carry it. It's fairly heavy poi pounders. And there's a gentleman who actually produces hand-pounded, manufactured poi, sells it at the open market. And this is our humble community at UCI doing poi pounding. It took us a whole morning to discover that hidden art. Next. Some of the cultural things is food to us isn't only subsistence, but it has significant cultural traditions that you must understand. We talk about feeding the infants. From early stages, infants are fed through the process of mana. You all know about mana being the spirit, the power, the essence. But young mothers breastfeed their children till they're able to consume food. At about 4, 5, 6 months, they start eating. The mother will then masticate the food and feed the child mouth to mouth. So that is very tradition and is still practiced today. Part of our basic traditional value that is used by every Hawaiian household, when you come to the door, the first thing we say is, mai, come in. No one comes to your door without inviting them in. And the very next words are, mai ai, come in and eat. So that's number one on our value system. Not only come on in, but come in and eat. So as practitioners in the future, if you go to any Hawaiian home or a Pacific Islander home and they offer you food, please partake, even if it's just a little bit. But to not partake of their food is a total disrespect. So just take a little if you're not sure about it. So we're going to introduce you to some of the foods so it won't be foreign to you when you go to our homes. Okay? Mai ai. Come and eat. That's really important. Food is life. Food is our tradition. Ho'okipa, hospitality, is critical in all island lifestyle. The hospitality for anyone, and that's what happened, I guess, in ancient Hawaiians. We welcomed everybody to Hawaii. We welcomed them. They took our language, they took our culture, they took our religions. But Hawaiians didn't complain. That was part of their value system. So we do share. Ho'okipa. Kuleana. In food preparation, our young children, from very young, learn what kuleana is, your personal responsibility, your role. So for us, food and food preparation is a process of learning different roles, what your kuleana is. When Uncle was 12, we'd go to a luau. We'd go 3 or 4 days before to prepare the imu, or the pit, for the pig. His first assignment at age 10 to 12, he was given the shovel. He was offered to dig the hole with Uncle and Tutu. So he learned how to dig the traditional imu. I, at age 13 and 14, as I learned to manipulate the knives, I first got in cutting tomatoes. got to the point that I could cut them pretty well. They all look pretty even. And I would graduate then to onions. Then the ultimate responsibility at preparing what we call lomi salmon or salt salmon, and in the Hispanic community it's called ceviche. We use salt salmon and not white fish. So in preparing food, the ultimate for the girls is to be able to cut the salt salmon. That was the most important ingredient in lomi salmon. And I wish we had some. For all of you who tried poi, always remember, if you're eating poi, take a spoonful of the salt salmon, and it'll help the poi go down a little easier. Poi is Elmer's glue, tastes very, very bland. You need something salty to help it go down, okay? Not a spoonful full of sugar, but something a little salty. So lomi salmon and poi goes hand in hand, or salt fish. We learn through observation and listening. We were never told, hold the knife in a certain fashion, cut your tomatoes in half, then in quarters. You learn through observation and listening to the elders talk. So food and its preparation is a traditional learning or educational experience. Taro. Ancient Hawaiian diet. Our carbohydrates came from taro, sweet potato, breadfruit, and yams. All of you know about Captain Bligh and the breadfruit. I'm sorry we don't have breadfruit. It doesn't grow here. We're going to try and discover how to grow them in California, but that's a resource that we're trying to rediscover. They're sold now, skinned, frozen, in a Fijian market. So if you want breadfruit, that's where they are. Leafy greens, taro leaves, sweet potato leaves, all the indigenous ferns, seaweed. Our foods were banana, mountain apple. And if you ever visit the islands, you can smell the mountain apple going through the rainforest. So that's a sample plate. The lau lau, which is a wrapped taro leaf wrapped meat, salt fish, pork, the little bowl of poi, the lomi salmon in front. That's a very traditional meal. Next. Made up 7-8% of their diet. For protein, only 12% of their wholesome diet was made out of fish, shellfish, or chicken. Pork was only given to the ali'i. Oh, thank you. Oh. Thank you. Mahalo. Okay. Pork was only eaten by the ali'i, the higher royalty, and the kings. Pork was not that abundant. But today you see everything fried, everything made with a lot of pork. Well, in ancient times, we had fish, shellfish, chicken. Our fats came from coconut, of course, fresh coconut, chicken, fish, and human milk. The mothers breastfed. That was very traditional in the islands. And the most important one that you, if you have a chance to enjoy, are poke. The poke ahi, pieces, poke is piece. So it's either poke ahi or poke aku. It's pieces of tuna. And depending on what grade of tuna, the ahi is more expensive, the aku is the cheaper. It's the jack tuna. So the different quality of poke that you'll enjoy when you travel the islands or go to a traditional Hawaiian dinner. Okay, next. Traditional heating process. We use lomi lomi, massage, touch. That was critical. And there are many people sprouting their little shingles outside their door saying, you know, I'm a lomi expert. Well, all of these traditions are passed down through generations of learning, observation, watching tutu, visiting family with your grandmother or grandaunt. So these are not things you can learn in 6 weeks on the island of Kauai from Auntie Edith. Okay? A lot of folks around say, oh, I'm a lomi lomi expert. I can do lomi lomi. They can do massage. But even our certified massagers now are certified over at least a year course, 8 months to a year. Lomi lomi in Hawaiian style or Pacific Island style. Samoa, Tonga, all the Polynesians have their own variations of lomi lomi experts. Okay? And lomi sound familiar? Remember the previous slide? The lomi salmon? You learn, and that's the ultimate. After you cut the salmon, We learn to lomi the onion, the tomato with the salt salmon. So that's all part of the process of lomi lomi. So we learn very young how to lomi, how to massage. First the lomi salmon, and then tutu or your grandaunt will teach you how to massage. We have lua, the bone setters. There also are the bone breakers. There's a whole defense system of lua. They were the inner circle for the mo'i or the king. They're the secret defense for all the i'i. They would take out the enemy, and really they knew exactly where to break the bone and where to kill the enemy. So they were the ones when Kamehameha came, people would throw spears at him. A lua artist can capture the spear without killing themselves. So that's the art of lua. So as they break bone, they also are experts at setting bone. And I've seen, and I'm an very old, rehab nurse, and I witnessed our elder setting a dislocated shoulder after sweating went in place and everything else was in place. The gentleman had a dislocated shoulder early in the morning setting up for a festival. Well, at 5:30 that night, our elder came and I asked him, "Uncle, can you help set the young man's shoulder?" Thinking we have to take him to an ER because all that swelling was already in place. All he did was ask for a kukui nut, rubbed the joint 3 times, and without any pain, he reset the shoulder. I am a true believer that many of the lua artists are also bone setters. The traditional plants, herbal medicine I use, la'au, lapa'au, and I have a collection of some of the traditional plants we use still today. So if you want to take a look at it, if you're interested in those plants, I have a collection of la'au, lapa'au, the herbal healing plants. Ho'oponopono is one of the most precious and now a traditional practice returning to the Hawaiians, and it's conflict resolution. And Ho'oponopono is now used in many of our institutions, incarcerated. Unfortunately, we fill all the prisons in Hawaii. We have a large number of prisoners. Ho'oponopono helps us, help them in the transitions back to the community. So these are some of the traditional healing arts of Hawaiians. Thank you. Changes over time. Well, as the Hawaiians were there in the islands, in came the business folks, all the po'i haole from the east, all our Christian, our missionaries. But along them came the Asian communities. So if you notice, Uncle is not a pure Hawaiian. He's Hawaiian Chinese. A large number of our community are Hawaiian Chinese, Hawaiian Japanese. So the Asian communities brought in all their Asian diet. So who's been to a luau and had teriyaki beef or teriyaki chicken? That's not tradition. That's the Asian influence over time, okay? Our lifestyle and work went from rural to villages and town living. And today, the urban lifestyle predominates. Many of our Hawaiian homes are now returning back to the agrarian lifestyle. So in many ways, in some of the outer islands in Hawaii, you'll go to Maui and Kauai, and you see farms and farms of taro patches and other agrarian, other community farms going on. Energy output went from very active lifestyle. The first contact with Western contact said the Hawaiian males were one of the leanest, the strongest specimen of men, as written by Captain Cook, by one of his recorders, and that we went from a very active lifestyle to a very sedentary lifestyle. We lost our cultural traditions, we lost our language, but today we are now re-immersing Olelo Hawaii, our Hawaiian language, and there is a community of young folks who are fluent in Olelo Hawaii, which is our native tongue. The Christian ministry were predominant, and many of the things that we believed in, hula, chant, went underground. Mahalo to our kupuna, who took all of the traditions of hula and kept it hidden, because the Christian ministries looked upon it as pagan. and outlawed it. It was not accepted. Hawaiians, however, knew they continued to spearfish. We surfed. We outrigger paddled, hoiva'a. Any given weekend, you can go down to Redondo Beach, Newport Beach, and you'll see the Outrigger Canoe Club still paddling. So this has now flourished throughout all the states in the continent and Canada. So hoiva'a in the 1950s, Uncle Kaibi's uncle, Noah Kalama, grandfather of outrigger paddling, introduced the Malia canoe, outrigger canoe, to California. The warrior training. There's a whole group of young men now are relearning lua and learning the essence of their role as men in the Hawaiian society. We're now returning back to some basic training because of alcohol, substance abuse, and all the accidental incidents that came about. They're a small group of men led by the director of the University of Hawaii School of Medicine, who has introduced the Nakane conferences. And now once a year, the men get together to learn the art of lua, on making Hawaiian weaponry, but learning a lot of traditional values that ancient males, Hawaiian males, were trained in. So we are rediscovering that warrior training. Going back to our traditional diet, we're going to share some of it with you today. We have always maintained our traditional Hawaiian besides the Christian values. The Christian faith has gone, the Catholic faith has gone throughout the Pacific Islands, but in many of the islands we still maintain our traditional Christian faith. So many of the practices, though they may be Methodist in origin, they are traditional Tongan United Methodist Church. There's traditional Assembly of God Marshallese centers. So we have maintained some of the traditional training and teaching. The cultural education goes on, and both Ashna and Julia McMillan will share with you some of the fun things we do, and I'll share a few more with you as we go along. Thank you. We brought some of our foods with you, but this is a list of some of the foods we're going to share. We have alai, which is the red salt we use for blessing. We use for condiment. We use it for the poke, aku. So the alai salt, it's sea salt with the red mineral. We're going to share with you haupia, the coconut pudding. I didn't have any he'e. I wish I did. I would have on poke he'e poke for the octopus, which is great. The endemic fern, we do not and have not been able to raise it here in California, but that's also a very favorite of the islanders. Inamona is a kukui nut with salt. We just mash the kukui nut and salt, and it's used in our poke. That what gives it the flavor in any of the poke, the fish poke that you enjoy. Okay, lau lau you saw earlier. That's the tea leaf wrapped meat, pork, fish. And these are some of the ways we prepared food. Traditional ways of cooking was always cooked over coals, steamed, or baked. We never fried anything, okay? The only thing we used oil was for lamps. So luau, the taro leaves, were used for our feast. Poi is really the Hawaiian staff of life, and you're not going to be able to get away from poi. So now that you know how to eat poi with the lomi salmon, you do okay. Pulehu is a way to boil our fish, and that's very popular, and we still do that at home. Ulu is breadfruit. That's very hard to come by. It's now frozen in a plastic bag found in a Fijian market. We will share uala with you, or sweet potato, this afternoon. As Pacific Islander Health, we've been trained, and part of our outreach education and community engagement is teaching our community about cancer. Unfortunately, we shared the very late screening, late stage diagnosis with poor outreach. And I think the national, there was a national data report that showed Native Hawaiian women exceed African American women in cancer mortality. But because, as you know, many of your data is aggregated Asian Pacific Islander, we've never identified a problem. But when we started disaggregating, we found that Native Hawaiian women have the highest mortality due to cancer. Diabetes affects 1 out of 5 Hawaiians, probably 1 out of 2 Marshallese, and probably more Tongans. So among our community, we find a tremendous increase in our Southern California community due to diabetes. With diabetes, of course, is heart disease. All of the underlying risk factor for all of these is obesity. So we are trying a new initiative, beginning a new initiative, childhood obesity, thanks to Archana. We're going to be inviting them to join us and consult with us. We'd like to do some things helping our children, 0 to 5, and working our way up to the older populations. But we need to really address that crisis. Next. And I think when you talk about childhood obesity, you have to all know, without a doubt, all of you are learning, that to recognize that because childhood obesity is a complex issue, multiple level problem, that we take every piece of the community, every partner or every entity within the community, starting with the children and their parents, the family core, working with your teachers, your educators, our business leaders, our politicians and policymakers to really impact and make a difference. And right now we are targeting Pili Ohana. This is a program, that's why I'm saying if you want to volunteer, we'll take recruits. Pili Ohana is a program that has been practiced in Hawaii for the past 8 years. The program is ready to come across the ocean, and so we have volunteered to be a training site for Pili Ohana. So if any of you want to come and help us address childhood obesity, the Ohana obesity, family obesity, please let us know. Let your instructors know and we'll help you. It's a program designed for Pacific Islanders, and it's a training program tailored for Islanders. Thank you. And we are Mahalo, Whaapatai, Malo, Aupito, Siusmaase, Sulang, Komotata. I thank you on behalf of my community